The stars had never seen anything like the Corvani Empire. For 10,000 years, their ships had moved through space like dark clouds, covering entire solar systems in shadow. They were not just conquerors. They were something much worse. They were gods who had forgotten how to be anything else. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Defiant, watching the stars pass by through the main window. His ship was small compared to the military vessels back on Earth. It carried only 47 people, and most of them were scientists, not soldiers. Jake was 35 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes that had seen too many empty worlds. He had been in space for 8 months now, leading humanity's first real exploration mission beyond the outer rim. The mission was simple: find new worlds, study them, take pictures, send reports back to Earth. Do not make contact with alien life unless absolutely necessary. Jake had read those orders 100 times, but he never expected to find anything more dangerous than strange. Plants or maybe some primitive animals. Lisa Carter, the chief engineer, walked up behind him. She was a small woman with red hair tied back in a ponytail. Her hands were always dirty from working on the ship's engines, and she had a habit of talking to herself when she was thinking hard about a problem. "Captain," she said, "the long-range sensors are picking up something weird." Jake turned around. "Weird how?" "Big," Lisa said. "Really big, and it's moving toward us fast." Ben Rodriguez, the navigation officer, looked up from his control panel. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and serious eyes. He had joined the mission because he wanted to see the galaxy, but right now he looked like he wanted to go home. "Captain," Ben said, "whatever it is, it's huge. The computer says it's the size of a small moon." Amy Walsh, the communications officer, suddenly looked up from her station. She was blonde and usually cheerful, but now her face was pale. "Captain, I'm getting multiple signals. There's not just one ship out there. There are 5 of them." Jake felt his stomach drop. 5 ships the size of moons. That was not good news. "Put it on the main screen," he said. The window in front of them changed, showing the view from their long-range cameras. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The ships were like nothing he had ever imagined. They were made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow with its own light. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, like weapons made by angels. "My God," Lisa whispered. The ships moved closer, and Jake could see that they were covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched them. The largest ship was in the center, and it was easily 10 times bigger than the others. Amy's communication panel started beeping. "Captain, they're trying to contact us." "Put it through," Jake said. The bridge filled with a sound like music mixed with thunder. Then a voice spoke, but it was not like any human voice. It was deep and rich, like the sound of mountains talking. "Small vessel," the voice said, "you have entered the territory of the Corvani Empire. I am Overlord Zephyr 9, commander of this fleet. You will surrender your ship and prepare to be absorbed into our empire. Resistance is not possible. Escape is not possible. You have 10 of your time units to comply." Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was staring at the main screen with her mouth open. Ben was checking his navigation controls, probably looking for a way to run. Amy was recording everything, as she always did. Jake had been trained for first contact situations, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. The Corvani Empire. He had never heard of them, which meant they were either very far from Earth or very good at staying hidden. Either way, they clearly had technology that made human ships look like toys. "Captain," Ben said quietly, "I can't. Find a way out. They've surrounded us completely." Jake nodded. He had expected that. Ships that big did not need to worry about a tiny human vessel escaping. The voice spoke again. You have 5 time units remaining. Dr. Rachel Green, the ship's scientist, had been quiet until now. She was older than most of the crew, maybe 50, with gray hair and kind eyes. She spent most of her time studying alien plant samples and writing reports that no one back on Earth would read for months. Captain, she said, look at their ships. Really look at them. Jake looked at the main screen again. The crystal ships were beautiful, but there was something else. They seemed old. Not just old like an antique, but old like something that had been doing the same thing for so long that it had forgotten why it started. What do you see, Doctor? Jake asked. I see tiredness, Rachel said. Look at how they move. Look at how they're positioned. This is not the first time they've done this. They've done it thousands of times, maybe millions. Amy looked up from her station. Captain, they're powering up weapons. Big ones. Jake felt time slowing down. In a few seconds, he would have to make a choice that would decide whether his crew lived or died. He could surrender, and they would probably all become slaves in this Corvani empire. He could try to fight, but their tiny ship had no weapons that could even scratch those crystal giants. He could try to run, but Ben had already said that was impossible. Then Jake had an idea. It was probably a stupid idea. It was definitely a dangerous idea, but it was the only idea he had. Amy, he said, open a channel. Captain? Amy looked confused. Open a channel. I want to talk to this overlord. Amy pressed some buttons, and the communication system came alive. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Defiant, Jake said. I have a question for you, Overlord Zephyr 9. There was silence for a long moment. Then the mountain voice spoke again, but this time it sounded different, surprised. You wish to ask a question? The Overlord said. Yes, Jake said. I want to know why you do this. Why do you conquer other worlds? What's the point? The silence that followed was longer this time. Jake could feel his crew staring at him. Lisa looked like she thought he had lost his mind. Ben was shaking his head. Amy was recording everything with wide eyes. Finally, the Overlord spoke again. But his voice was different now. Uncertain. Why, he said. It is what we do. It is what we have always done. But why? Jake asked again. What do you get out of it? What makes you happy about conquering worlds? This time the silence stretched on so long that Jake began to wonder if the communication system had broken. The crystal ships hung in space like frozen music, their lights pulsing slowly. When the Overlord finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. I do not remember, he said. The words hung in space like a confession. I do not remember. Jake Morrison had asked a simple question, and somehow it had stopped the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. The Overlord's admission created a strange quiet that seemed to spread from ship to ship. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa Carter was staring at the communication panel like it might explode. Ben Rodriguez had stopped checking his navigation controls and was listening with his mouth slightly open. Amy Walsh was still recording, but her hands were shaking a little. Dr. Rachel Green stepped closer to Jake. Captain, she said quietly, I think you just did something that has never happened before. What do you mean? Jake asked. Look at their ships, Rachel said, pointing at the main screen. The lights are flickering. The patterns on their hulls are changing. I think you confused them. Jake could see what she meant. The crystal ships that had seemed so sure and powerful a few minutes ago now looked different. Their lights pulsed in irregular patterns, and the symbols on their surfaces were shifting more quickly, like they were trying to solve a puzzle. Amy's communication panel beeped. Captain, the Overlord wants to talk again. Put him through. Jake said. The mountain voice came back. but it sounded different now. Less certain. More human, somehow. Captain Morrison, the Overlord said, your question has created an unusual situation. In 10,000 years of conquest, no species has ever asked us why we conquer. They surrender, or they fight, or they try to run. But they do not ask why. Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. According to his training, he should be trying to gather information about their technology and their weaknesses. Instead, he was having what felt like a therapy session with an alien overlord. Maybe that's the problem, Jake said. Maybe someone should have asked a long time ago. There was another long pause. Then the Overlord said something that surprised everyone on the bridge. May I ask you a question, Captain Morrison? Jake almost laughed. Sure. Go ahead. Why are you here? Why did your people send you so far from your home world? Jake thought about it for a moment. It was a good question. We came to explore, to see what's out there, to learn about the universe. To conquer new worlds for your empire? No, Jake said. We don't have an empire. We just wanted to see what we could find. You travel across the galaxy just to look at things? Well, yes. And to learn. To understand. We take pictures and samples and write reports. We try to figure out how things work. The silence that followed was the longest yet. When the Overlord spoke again, his voice was very quiet. We used to do that, he said. Dr. Rachel Green had been working at her science station while Jake talked to the Overlord. Now she looked up with excitement in her eyes. Captain, she said, I've been analyzing their communication signals. There's something strange about them. Strange how? Jake asked. The energy patterns don't match their ships, Rachel said. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but the beings using it, they're tired, deeply tired. Like they've been doing the same thing for so long that they've forgotten how to do anything else. Lisa Carter had been quiet, but now she spoke up. Captain, I've been scanning their ships with our sensors. The power systems are incredible, but they're not generating their own energy. They're drawing it from somewhere else. Where? Jake asked. Lisa looked uncomfortable. From planets, lots of them. The energy signature suggests they're somehow harvesting power from living worlds. Jake felt sick. You mean they're killing planets? Not exactly, Lisa said. More like draining them, taking something vital from them. Amy looked up from her station. Captain, I'm getting more signals. Not from the Overlord, but from other ships in the fleet. They're talking to each other, and their conversations are weird. Weird how? They keep asking each other questions, Amy said. Questions they've never asked before. Things like, what did we do before we started conquering? And when was the last time we created something instead of destroying it? Jake realized that his simple question had started something much bigger than he had intended. The Corvani fleet was not just stopped. It was thinking. Maybe for the first time in thousands of years. Captain Morrison, the Overlord's voice came through the speakers again. I would like to ask another question. Go ahead. What do your people do when they are not exploring? Jake thought about Earth, about cities and farms and schools and theaters, about people falling in love and having families and making art, and music, about all the small, ordinary things that made life worth living. We live, Jake said. We build things and make things and fix things. We tell stories and sing songs and paint pictures. We have families and friends. We laugh and cry and dream about the future. You create things all the time. It's what we do. We used to create things, the Overlord said, and his voice was so sad that Jake felt sorry for him. I remember now. We used to build beautiful cities and compose music that could make stars dance. We explored the galaxy not to conquer it, but to understand it. We were artists and philosophers and scientists. What happened? Jake asked. We became too powerful, the Overlord said. Our technology grew beyond our wisdom. We could reshape matter with our thoughts, travel between. Stars and moments extend our lives indefinitely. But power without purpose becomes tyranny. We forgot how to create because we could simply take whatever we wanted. Dr. Rachel Green was nodding as she listened. Captain, she said, that makes sense. When you can have anything without effort, you stop appreciating what you have. When you can control everything, you stop learning how to grow. Amy spoke up. Captain, the other ships are still talking to each other. They're remembering things. Old memories from before they became conquerors. Some of them are talking about art and music they used to make. Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Overlord Zephyr 9, he said, would you like to remember how to create things again? The pause was shorter this time. Is such a thing possible? I don't know, Jake said honestly. But maybe we could try to figure it out together. Together? That's what humans do, Jake said. When we have a problem, we work together to solve it. When we want to learn something, we share what we know with each other. When we want to create something beautiful, we combine our different ideas and skills. You would help us? Even though we were about to conquer your ship? Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was nodding. Ben looked scared but determined. Amy was smiling. Dr. Rachel Green was practically glowing with excitement. That's what humans do, Jake said again. We help each other, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous, even when we don't know if it will work. The Overlord was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, stronger, more alive. Captain Morrison, he said, I would like to try, but I must warn you. There are others in our empire who will not understand. The High Command has maintained order for 10,000 years by ensuring that questions like yours are never asked. They will see your influence as a threat to everything we have built. Are they coming? Jake asked. Yes, the Overlord said. Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime has already been notified of our delay. He leads a war fleet that makes my ships look like toys. He will be here soon, and he will not be interested in questions or memories or learning to create things again. Jake felt his stomach tighten. How long do we have? Perhaps 6 of your hours, the Overlord said. Lisa looked at Jake with worry in her eyes. Captain, maybe we should try to run now while we still can. But Jake was thinking about something else. About the tired voices of the Corvani talking to each other for the first time in centuries. About an ancient species remembering what it felt like to dream. About the chance to help an entire civilization find its way back to being something. More than just conquerors. No, he said, we're staying. If we're going to help them remember how to create, we need to start now. The next few hours changed everything. Jake Morrison watched as the most powerful fleet in the galaxy slowly remembered what it meant to be curious. The crystal ships had moved closer to the Defiant, no longer threatening but protective, like ancient guardians awakening from a long sleep. Overlord Zephyr 9 had done something unprecedented. He had invited the humans aboard his flagship. Dr. Rachel Green was the first to go, along with Amy Walsh. They took a small shuttle across the void between ships, and when they returned, their faces were full of wonder and sadness. Captain, Rachel said, you need to see this. She had brought back recordings and data files. The inside of the Corvani ship was like a museum of forgotten dreams. Vast halls filled with art that had not been touched for thousands of years. Libraries containing the wisdom of 100 conquered worlds. Gardens where strange and beautiful plants grew in patterns that seemed to tell stories. They kept everything, Rachel said. Every world they conquered, every species they absorbed into their empire. They saved their art, their music, their literature, but they never looked at it. They just stored it away like they were ashamed of it. Amy had recorded hours of conversations with individual Corvani. Their voices were different from the Overlord's commanding tone. They sounded lost, confused, like children who had been playing a game for so long they had forgotten it was supposed to be fun. "Listen to this," Amy said, playing back one of the recordings. A gentle voice spoke, barely audible. "I remember colors. Before we became energy beings, when we still had physical forms, I loved to paint with colors. Blues and greens and purples. That do not exist in this form. I painted landscapes of worlds that existed only in my imagination. I have not thought about painting for 3,000 years. Another voice, older and more tired. I wrote poetry once. Songs about the beauty of distant stars and the mystery of time. I wrote a poem about the first snowfall on my whole world. I remember every word, but I have not spoken it aloud since we began the conquest. I thought such things were weakness." Jake felt his heart breaking for them. These were not monsters. They were artists and dreamers who had somehow lost their way and become something they were never meant to be. Lisa Carter had been studying the technical aspects of the Corvani ships. What she found was disturbing, but also hopeful. "Captain," she said, "their power system is more complex than we thought. They do drain energy from conquered worlds, but not in the way I expected. They're not taking electricity or heat. They're taking something else, something that makes life meaningful." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Dreams," Lisa said. "Hopes. The creative energy that makes people want to build things and make art and explore the unknown. When they conquer a world, they drain away the population's ability to imagine a better future. That's what powers their ships and keeps them alive." Dr. Rachel Green nodded. "That explains why they're so tired. They've been living on stolen dreams for 10,000 years, but they never create any new ones. They're like vampires feeding on something they've forgotten how to make for themselves." Ben Rodriguez had been monitoring the long-range sensors. "Captain," he said, "I'm picking up something big heading this way. Really big." Jake knew what it was before Ben said it. The war fleet that Overlord Zephyr 9 had warned them about. Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime was coming to end this unprecedented crisis. How long? Jake asked. "Maybe 2 hours," Ben said. Jake made a decision that would either save 2 civilizations or destroy them both. "Amy, open a channel to all the Corvani ships." "All of them?" Amy asked. "All of them." Amy worked at her controls, and suddenly Jake's voice was being broadcast to every Corvani vessel in the fleet. Thousands of ancient beings heard him speak. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Defiant," he said. "I know you're all listening. I know you're all thinking about things you haven't thought about for a long time. I know you're remembering who you used to be before you became conquerors." He paused, looking at his crew. They were all watching him with faith in their eyes, trusting him to find the right words. "In 2 hours, Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime will arrive with a war fleet. He's coming to stop what's happening here. He's coming to make sure you never ask questions again. He's coming to make sure you never remember how to create things again." Jake could feel the weight of history in his words. "But you have a choice. You can go back to being what you were, following orders and conquering worlds and draining away the dreams of innocent people. Or you can choose to become something different, something better." Amy was monitoring the responses from the Corvani. "Ships, Captain," she whispered. "They're all listening. I'm getting thousands of responses." "You still have time," Jake continued. "Time to remember who you really are. Time to choose what you want to become. You don't have to be conquerors. You can be explorers again. You can be artists again. You can be the beings you were meant to be. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the fleet, Corvani began to speak, not to command or threaten, but to share. They told stories of their home worlds. They sang songs they had not sung for millennia. They began to create. Overlord. Zephyr 9 contacted the Defiant directly. "Captain Morrison," he said, "what you have done today is unprecedented. But I must ask you something important. When Nexus Prime arrives, will you stand with us?" Jake looked at his crew again. Lisa was nodding eagerly. Ben looked scared, but determined. Amy was smiling through tears. Dr. Rachel Green was practically vibrating with excitement. "Yes," Jake said, "we'll stand with you, even though it means you will be fighting against beings with power beyond your imagination." "Especially then," Jake said. "That's what humans do. We stand with our friends, even when the odds are impossible." Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. The Corvani fleet began to change. Not just their attitudes, but their ships. Themselves. The crystal hulls began to glow with new colors. The rigid military formations softened into more organic patterns. Most remarkably, the ships began to generate their own energy instead of drawing it from conquered worlds. "Captain," Lisa said with amazement in her voice, "they're not parasites anymore. They're creating their own power by working together, by sharing their creativity with each other." Dr. Rachel Green was studying the readings. "It's like they're remembering how to be alive again, how to grow instead of just consuming." Amy had been in constant communication with individual Corvani throughout the fleet. "Captain, they want to show you something." On the main screen, the view changed to show space around the fleet. What Jake saw took his breath away. The Corvani ships were creating art. Massive, beautiful sculptures made of light and energy and crystallized space-time. Paintings that stretched across entire solar systems. Music that could be seen as well as heard, turning the void between stars into a symphony of color and sound. "They're free," Rachel whispered. "They're actually free." But the celebration was short-lived. Ben's sensors detected the approaching threat. "Captain, the war fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. It's enormous." Jake looked at the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime had brought 1,000 ships, each one larger than any vessel in Zephyr 9's fleet. They were ancient and terrible, powered by the concentrated dreams of countless conquered worlds. The lead ship was the size of a small planet. Its hull was black crystal that seemed to absorb light itself. As it approached, Jake could feel something cold and hungry reaching out toward them. "Captain Morrison," came a new voice over the communication system. It was deeper than Zephyr 9's. Voice, older, filled with the weight of 10,000 years of absolute power. "I am Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime. You have corrupted my servants with your questions and your weakness. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." Jake looked at his crew one more time. They were scared, but they were ready. They had helped an entire species remember how to dream. Now they would help them fight for the right to keep dreaming. "This is Captain Jake Morrison," he said, "and my answer is no." The battle for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. For the first time in 10,000 years, Corvani fought against Corvani. The war that erupted around the tiny human ship was not just a battle of weapons and technology. It was a war of ideas, a conflict. Between two visions of what the Corvani could become, Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime's warfleet moved like a plague across space. His ships were massive and dark, their hulls made of crystal so ancient it had turned black with the accumulated weight of centuries. These were not just vessels of war. They were monuments to conquest, powered by the stolen dreams of billions of beings across the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the impossible battle unfold around his small ship. Overlord Zephyr 9 had positioned his fleet between the humans and the approaching darkness, but Jake could see they were outnumbered 10-1. "Captain," Lisa Carter said, her voice tight with worry, "their weapons are beyond anything we've ever seen. They're not just shooting energy beams. They're shooting despair itself." Jake could see what she meant. When Nexus Prime's weapons hit one of Zephyr 9's ships, the crystal hull didn't just crack. It lost its color, its light, its hope. The ship would hang in space like a dead thing, its crew trapped in a vessel that had forgotten how to dream. But something unexpected was happening. Every time one of Zephyr 9's ships was struck by the weapons of despair, other ships in the fleet would move closer to it. They would share their light, their energy, their newly rediscovered hope. The damaged ship would begin to glow again, its hull healing not just physically but spiritually. "They're learning," Dr. Rachel Green said with wonder in her voice. "They're learning how to heal each other." Amy Walsh had been monitoring communications across both fleets. "Captain, it's not just Zephyr 9's ships. Other Corvani commanders are starting to question Nexus Prime. I'm picking up defections from the Warfleet." Jake watched as individual ships broke away from Nexus Prime's formation and moved toward Zephyr 9's fleet. These were not deserters fleeing a losing battle. They were beings who had heard the questions that Jake had asked, who had remembered what it felt like to create instead of destroy. Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime's voice boomed across space, filled with ancient rage. "Zephyr 9, you have forgotten your place. You have forgotten the natural order. The strong rule the weak. The powerful take what they need from the powerless. This is the way of the universe." Zephyr 9's response was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. "No, Nexus Prime, that is not the way of the universe. That is the way of fear, the way of beings who have forgotten how to grow." "Growth is weakness," Nexus Prime replied. "Change is chaos. I have maintained order for 10,000 years by ensuring that such dangerous ideas never take root." "What you call order," Zephyr 9 said, "is death. You have turned us into parasites, feeding on the dreams of others because we have forgotten how to dream ourselves." The battle intensified. Nexus Prime's flagship, a massive planet-sized vessel called the Eternal Dominion, began to glow with malevolent energy. Jake could feel its power reaching out like cold fingers, trying to drain the hope from everyone around it. But then something remarkable happened. The human ship Defiant began to glow too, not with the harsh light of Corvani technology, but with something warmer, something that came from the hearts and minds of 47 humans who refused to give up hope. "Captain," Lisa said, staring at her instruments in amazement, "we're generating some kind of energy field. It's not coming from our engines or our power systems. It's coming from us." Double quotes Dr. Rachel Green was studying the readings. "It's the same energy that the Corvani used to drain from conquered worlds. But we're not draining it. We're creating it. We're making it ourselves." Jake understood. The energy that powered the Corvani Empire was not really stolen from conquered worlds. It was created by the act of dreaming, of hoping, of believing that tomorrow could be better than today. The Corvani had forgotten how to create this energy themselves, so they had to take it from others. But humans had never forgotten how to hope. "Amy," Jake said, broadcast to all ships, Corvani and human alike. Amy opened the channel, and Jake's voice reached every being in both fleets. "Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime," Jake said, "you're wrong about the nature of power. Real power doesn't come from taking things from others. It comes from giving, from creating, from helping others become more than they thought they could be." Nexus Prime's laughter was like the sound of dying stars. "Foolish human. You speak of giving as if it were strength, but you are weak. Your species is weak. Your ship is weak. You have nothing that can stand against the accumulated power of 10,000 years of conquest. You're right, Jake said. We are weak. Our ship is tiny. Our weapons are nothing compared to yours. But we have something you've forgotten how to value. And what is that? Friends. As Jake spoke, something extraordinary began to happen. The Corvani ships that had joined Zephyr 9's fleet began to glow with the same warm light that surrounded the Defiant, but it wasn't just the ships. It was spreading to ships in Nexus Prime's fleet as well. One by one, ancient Corvani commanders were remembering what it felt like to hope. Captain, Ben Rodriguez said, look at the tactical display. Half of Nexus Prime's fleet is changing sides. Jake could see it happening. The rigid military formation of the war fleet was dissolving as individual ships made their own choices. Some moved toward Zephyr 9's fleet. Others simply stopped fighting and began creating the same light sculptures that had amazed Jake earlier. Nexus Prime's rage was terrible to behold. His flagship began to pulse with dark energy, and Jake could feel the Supreme Overlord's power reaching out to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. All ships, Nexus Prime commanded, target the human vessel. Destroy it, and this. Infection will die with it, but the order was not obeyed. Instead, hundreds of Corvani ships moved to surround the Defiant. They formed a protective barrier of light and crystal, shielding the tiny human ship with their own bodies. Captain, Amy said, tears streaming down her face, they're protecting us. All of them. Even the ones who were trying to kill us an hour ago. Zephyr 9's voice came through the communication system. Captain Morrison, you have given us something we thought was lost forever. You have given us back ourselves. Now we give you something in return. We give you our protection, our friendship, and our promise that no harm will come to you or your people. But Nexus Prime was not finished. His flagship began to change, growing larger and darker. Jake could see that the Supreme Overlord was drawing power from the remaining ships in his fleet, draining them of energy and hope to fuel one final, devastating attack. If I cannot maintain order, Nexus Prime's voice boomed across space, then I will destroy everything. It is better to rule over ashes than to watch the universe fall into chaos. The Eternal Dominion prepared to fire a weapon that would destroy not just the human ship, but every vessel in the area. It was a weapon powered by despair, designed to drain the hope from entire solar systems. But Jake had learned something about hope during the past few hours. It was not something that could be easily destroyed. It was something that grew stronger when it was shared. All ships, Jake said, his voice calm despite the approaching destruction. Share your light. All of it. Every bit of hope and creativity. And love that you've rediscovered. Share it with each other and with us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every Corvani ship in Zephyr 9's fleet began to glow brighter. They were not just sharing energy. They were sharing dreams, memories, hopes for the future, and the joy of creating something beautiful together. The wave of light that spread from ship to ship was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. It was not a weapon. It was a celebration, a declaration that the galaxy could be something more than a place of conquest and fear. When the light reached Nexus Prime's flagship, something unexpected happened. The ancient Supreme Overlord's voice changed. The rage and hatred were still there, but underneath them, Jake could hear something else. Pain, loneliness, the anguish of a being who had spent 10,000 years cutting himself off from everything that made existence meaningful. I remember, Nexus Prime said, his voice barely a whisper. I remember what we were before. I remember the beauty we created. I remember the joy of discovery. I remember being happy. The Eternal Dominion's weapons powered down. The dark crystal hull began to change, becoming lighter, more like the ships that had joined Zephyr 9's fleet. But it is too late. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in what used to be the command center of the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship had been transformed from a weapon of conquest into something entirely new. Where once there had been tactical displays showing conquered worlds, now there were art galleries filled with creations from 100 different species. Where once there had been weapons designed to drain hope from entire populations, now there were workshops where beings from across the galaxy worked together to build a better future. The ship had been renamed the Unity, and it served as the headquarters for something that had never existed before in galactic history, the Galactic Cooperation Council. Representatives from thousands of worlds met here to share ideas, solve problems together, and make decisions that affected the entire galaxy. Jake was no longer just the captain of a small exploration ship. He had been elected as the first human ambassador to the council, though he still preferred to think of himself as an explorer. A difference was that now he was exploring possibilities instead of just planets. "Captain Morrison," came a familiar voice behind him. Jake turned to see Nexus approaching. The being who had once been Supreme Overlord Nexus Prime looked completely different now. His energy form still glowed, but the light was warm and welcoming instead of cold and threatening. He had learned to project a more human-like appearance when talking to species that found his true form intimidating. "Just Jake," Jake said, as he always did. "We've talked about this." Nexus smiled, an expression that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "Old habits," he said. "I wanted to show you something." He led Jake to a viewing window that looked out into space. What Jake saw took his breath away, even though he had been seeing similar sights for months now. The space around the Unity was filled with ships, but they were not arranged in military formations. Instead, they moved in patterns that were beautiful to watch, like a three-dimensional dance performed by hundreds of different species. "The Korvoxi are teaching the Delvarians how to sing with their ship engines," Nexus said. "The humans from the colony ship New Hope are sharing their agricultural techniques with the Zentari. The Mollusk Collective has agreed to help the Crystal. Beings develop new forms of art that can exist in both physical and energy states." Jake watched as a small human cargo ship moved alongside a massive Corvani cruiser. The two vessels were connected by streams of light that pulsed in rhythm, sharing not just cargo, but ideas, stories, and dreams. "It's working," Jake said with wonder in his voice. "It's actually working. Better than we hoped," Nexus agreed. "Do you know what the most remarkable thing is? Crime rates across the galaxy have dropped to almost nothing. When people have hope for the future and meaningful work to do, they don't need to steal or fight." Jake nodded. It made sense. Most crime came from desperation, from people who saw no other way to get what they needed. When everyone had the opportunity to contribute something valuable and receive what they needed in return, the motivation for crime disappeared. Dr. Rachel Green approached them, carrying a datapad filled with reports. She had been appointed as the head of interspecies scientific cooperation, and she loved every minute of it. "Jake," she said, "you need to see the latest reports from the restoration projects." Jake took the datapad and scrolled through the information. For the past 6 months, teams of volunteers from dozens of species had been working to repair the damage caused by 10,000 years of Corvani conquest. They were not just rebuilding destroyed cities or replanting dead forests. They were restoring something more important: hope. "The Kepler 442 system is producing art again," Rachel said. "For the first time in 300 years, the vegan colonies have started a new university. The Sirius Mining Federation has converted half their operations to manufacture toys and musical instruments instead of weapons. Jake smiled as he read. Every report told the same story. Worlds that had been drained of creativity were rediscovering what it meant to dream. Lisa Carter and Ben Rodriguez had also found new roles in the galactic community. Lisa was working with a team of engineers from 17 different species to develop new technologies that created energy instead of consuming it. Ben had become the head of the Galactic Navigation Guild, helping ships from different cultures find their way to new worlds and new possibilities. Amy Walsh had perhaps the most important job of all. She had become the galaxy's first interspecies communications coordinator, developing translation protocols that didn't just convert words from one language to another, but helped different species understand each other's thoughts and feelings. Ambassador Morrison, came another voice. Jake turned to see Zephyr approaching. The former overlord had also changed his appearance, choosing to look more like the artistic being he had been before the conquest began. He wore robes that seemed to be made of crystallized music, and his energy form shifted through colors that corresponded to his emotions. "The council is ready for the ceremony," Zephyr said. Jake nodded. Today was a special day, the first anniversary of what historians were already calling the Great Question, the day that a small human ship had asked a simple question and changed the course of galactic history. They made their way to the main council chamber, a vast space that could hold representatives from thousands of worlds. The chamber was filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size. Some were humanoid, others were pure energy, still others were collective minds housed in mechanical bodies. But they all had one thing in common. They were all there by choice, working together to build something better than what had come before. At the center of the chamber stood a simple monument. It was not made of expensive materials or advanced technology. It was just a small replica of the UES Defiant, the tiny exploration ship that had accidentally started a revolution. Jake took his place at the speaker's podium. As he looked out at the assembled representatives, he thought about how much had changed in 1 year. The Corvani Empire was gone, replaced by something that no one had thought possible, a truly voluntary galactic community. Friends, Jake said, and the word felt right. These beings from across the galaxy had become friends in the truest sense. 1 year ago, my crew and I were just explorers looking for new worlds to study. We never expected to find ourselves at the center of the biggest change in galactic history. There was gentle laughter from the audience. Many of them had heard this story before, but they never tired of hearing it. "But I've learned something important this year," Jake continued. "The change didn't start with us. It started with all of you, with every Corvani who chose to remember what they used to be, with every conquered species that chose forgiveness over revenge, with every individual who decided to build instead of destroy." He looked at Nexus, who was sitting in the front row next to other former Corvani commanders. "The most powerful being in the galaxy taught me that real strength comes from admitting when you're wrong and choosing to be better." Jake's voice grew stronger as he continued. "We've accomplished something amazing this year. We've proven that different species can work together. We've shown that conflicts can be resolved through understanding instead of force. We've demonstrated that the galaxy is big enough for everyone to thrive." The audience was listening intently. Representatives from worlds that had been enemies for centuries were sitting next to each other, working together on common goals. "But our work is not finished," Jake said. "There are still worlds out there that have never known freedom. There are still species that think the only way to survive is to conquer others. There are still beings who have forgotten how to hope." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "So I want to ask you the same question that started all of this. Why are we here? What do we want to accomplish? What kind of galaxy do we want to build for our children?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Representatives from thousands Of worlds began to speak, sharing their dreams for the future. They talked about exploration and discovery, about art and music and literature, about the simple joy of learning something new every day. A young Corvani, who had never known the Empire, spoke up. I want to see what's beyond the edge of the galaxy. I want to find new forms of life and new ways of thinking. A representative from a world that had been under Corvani control for centuries said, I want my people to remember how to laugh. We have been serious for so long that we have forgotten what joy feels like. An elderly being from a species that Jake had never seen before added, I want to live long enough to see a generation that grows up without knowing what war is. Jake listened to them all, and he felt the same sense of wonder that had driven him to become an explorer in the first place. The galaxy was full of possibilities, full of potential, full of hope. Then let's make it happen, Jake said. Together. The ceremony concluded with something that had become a tradition in the new galactic community. Every ship in the area turned on their lights and moved into a pattern that could be seen from the Unity's viewing windows. It was a different pattern each time, created spontaneously by thousands of beings, working together without a central plan. Jake watched from the observation deck as the ships danced through space. Lisa Carter stood beside him, along with Ben Rodriguez, Amy Walsh, and Dr. Rachel Green.